Matters. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I want to first start by acknowledging that though I'm standing up here by myself, the ideas that I'm about to share with you were not developed just by myself. They were co-created with my friend and collaborator, Tim Tompkins, who is going to be the co-author of the chapter that we ultimately write for this volume. Tim is the retired and recovering former executive director of the Times Square Alliance in New York. And he couldn't be with us here today because he's in Taipei, which is a really good excuse because that's super far from here. But I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be the first person who's not a sociologist to speak with you today about what I think about place. We had a geographer. We had a geographer. Yeah, so and what I'm showing here is a picture of Central Park in New York City in 1977. On page B1 of the Thursday, May 26, 1977 issue of the New York Times, here's how the article started. From Central Park, the once green lawn of the sheep meadow is wearing away, gradually becoming a dust bowl with overuse. At the Bethesda fountain, drugs are sold regularly, and the duck pond each night becomes a receptacle for beer and soda cans. In Prospect Park in Brooklyn, the Japanese tea house is a burned-out ruin. Tennis house has been wrecked, and the Litchfield mansion is a nightly target of vandals. In Flushing Meadows, Corona Park in Queens, blacktop footpaths continue to crack and buckle. Weeds grow hip-high, while a federal demolition crew, 12 years late, takes apart the steel skeleton of the United States Pavilion, one of the last vestiges of the 1964-65 World's Fair, the fair that was to lead to a great new park in Queens. Here in Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx, the nature preserve that was the public fascination of John Kieran is daily filled with trash, and the muskrat mounds have vanished. And in Orchard Beach Park, houses have been blown up and knocked down after each weekend. The entire length of the beach sparkles with shards of glass. These are New York City parks today. Okay. We just heard about how you can't design and then build. And I love that. My version of that, or Tim and I's version of that, is this Mario Cuomo quote from around the same time period that you campaign in poetry, but you need to govern in prose. Here's an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to start the same place everybody else wanted to start, with my own definition of what is a place. Before I get there, first, what was motivating me to share that picture of Central Park? And, what's my statement of why place matters right now? We're all hearing a lot in the newspaper about how, because of the rise of remote work and hybrid work, that cities are over. And there's a fear that right now we're going to re-enter the doom loop that created the crisis of the grass in Central Park in the 1970s. That these disruptions are creating a reduced demand for our downtowns, that will cause revenues to fall, services will have to be cut, that will lead to even more reduced demand, and that will become a self-reinforcing cycle that is going to destroy our cities. Okay, wait a minute. Can I get IT? I'm having a problem with my slides. Okay, it looks like you're trying to make a rhetorical point. Can you be more specific than something? Fair critique. I can do better. I can do better than something. Okay. The real doom loop has nothing to do with cities. It's something that can happen anywhere. It is a threat to all places. Instead of making this about cities or downtowns or New York, the real doom loop is that change is the only constant. It's happening all the time, not just during COVID. There is a constant need to adapt and remain flexible, to, as David was saying, be resilient and manage the change. However, We live in a society, in a world, in a government in which we have a variety of systems, policies, and practices that create unequal access to the information, the capacity, and the dollars that places need in order to change and evolve. That means that some places are more resilient than others. And so that creates a self-reinforcing cycle in which the places that are disadvantaged become further disadvantaged because they cannot compete meeting the needs of their residents and employers, etc. So we need to break the cycle. We know that place matters more than ever, but that we don't have what we need right now in order to take care of all places. Problem is not some places are unfairly doing well and doing better than others. It is that we know what all places need in order to thrive, and we simply have systems that withhold what is needed from some places. We need to propagate what we know works to build great places through all places. Okay, what is a place? So for me and Tim, a place is a geographic area, not just that has meaning. We've heard a lot about meaning so far today. It's an area towards which a person or group of people can feel a sense of ownership and agency. So from the get-go here, we are arguing that ownership is a critical part of how place is defined. But we're using a conception of ownership that is broader than property. We are focused on a very specific subset of places. We're not worrying about the cozy chair at home. We focus on places where public and private interests meet. So, for example, placemaking usually refers to efforts to enhance a place that is publicly accessible. Most often, that space is also publicly owned, not always. At the same time, to many people, including professionals in the field, place is a neighborhood or district containing both public spaces and privately owned assets. Place is where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, with a measurable and distinct value comes from that agglomeration. That is the emergent quality of place, not just meaning, but value. In our chapter, Tim and I round out some key concepts developed by other scholars that are necessary in order to understand these kinds of places. First, that they are neither wholly public nor wholly private, but rather common pool resources, where usage without norms or boundaries by one person or group, like the motorcycle riders who don't care about parking laws in this photo, can degrade the resource for everyone else. The classic economics example is of the one shepherd who does not think of the long term or of others and lets his sheep consume all of the grass in a common pasture. Remember the sheep meadow from Central Park in 1977? So, why am I blaming sheep and shepherds, right? Humans sampled all of the grass on the sheep meadow. We have no way of knowing which footprint it was that killed the last blade of grass. Everyone helped. And so that leads us to another key concept, collective failure and collective action. There's no earthly shepherd watching all of us. We're only going to have grass, or in the case of this photo, clean and clear sidewalks if we all do things a certain way all the time. That leads us to the last concept that we need, free rider. This is a beautiful, fun, vibrant street. But every individual and enterprise in this photo has not contributed at the same level in order to make it this way. That's okay, because every individual and enterprise is not deriving the same amount of value from this fun and vibrancy. So probably no one is at zero, just like there has to be some way to deal with those who degrade common pool resources. We also need a way to make sure that no one is excessively mooching off of them. This definition of place, therefore, also requires place governance, a governance mechanism that creates a forum for answering questions, negotiating rules and guidance, and pooling resources to keep the common pool sustained. Okay, onward. Place governance in the United States did not spring into being in the civil rights era or as a contemporary craft of neoliberal policymakers. There have always been common pool resources, the commons, and a need to manage them. Place governance as a mechanism for formalizing and managing aspects of American civic life has its roots in the colonial period, and modern place governance organizations have many precedents. American place governance has always been an undertaking of both elites and everyday citizens. That said, I now have to confess that I started this presentation here with that diagram of the real doom loop, and I said that change was the only constant, but I was telling you something that I know isn't true, right? Change isn't constant because sometimes it rains and sometimes it pours. Anyone who has lived through the last 5 years gets it. COVID, climate change, social media, fascism, artificial intelligence. We're all so tired. We can barely open the paper in the morning to find out what other thing we had never heard of yesterday that's going to change everything about tomorrow. And that's only if you still have a paper. The pace of change is faster than ever, but it's not totally without historical precedent. The 1970s were pretty bonkers too. In 1970, many cities in North America were in free fall. In his State of the Union that year, Nixon said that the violent and decayed central cities of our great metropolitan complexes are the most conspicuous area of failure in American life today. Whatever else was going on, starting in the back half of the 60s, with it came a dramatic and disproportionate increase in urban crime that accelerated the movement of people and capital from cities to suburbs. This graph shows a unique period between 1964 and 1990 where there were multiple years where the annual increase in the rate of U.S. violent crime was near or over 10%. It really was a different time. And if you thought Nixon was unchill, wait until I tell you what happened after that guy. By 1975, New York City was on the brink of bankruptcy, and the federal government took a hard pass on stepping in. But the city said to Ford, New York will live forever. And this is not just a New York story. At Brookings, we analyzed the metropolitan areas that contain what were the 44 largest U.S. cities in 1950. Of those, the median share of the population within 1950 city limits is down from 53% in 1950 to only 19% today. The idea that a much smaller population can finance the same level of services needed through general purpose government is simply unrealistic. So, even for cities like New York that ultimately grew in absolute terms while still losing regional market share, that still means that there are pressures on the core that simply have never before existed in history, and we need new ways to pool resources and work together. So at this point, you're wondering if I have anything to say about anywhere other than New York? I do. This is a neighborhood called Bloor West Village in Toronto. It's an immigrant neighborhood, predominantly Ukrainian, plenty of others in the mix. It's not downtown, it's not downtown adjacent. It's not even in the favored quarter. It's just another place, but it's special to someone. And it's a place where the idea of business improvement districts were born. The shop owners in this neighborhood came together because in the 1960s, they were experiencing more and more retail leakage to malls in the downtown and in the suburbs, right? In a mall, a single owner can put out decorations, do marketing, whatever. And who's going to do that for Bloor Street? So all the business owners got together, and the crisis of the 1970s spawned not just business improvement districts, but community gardens, the farmers market movement, community development corporations, new parks partnerships, all of these different ways of people coming together to work together, pool resources, and get things done for places. In our book chapter, we go on about these places at appalling length in terms of their powers and their authorizations and their revenue sources. We write about the example of downtown Houston and how there's this gigantic snarl of organizations and entities with various capacities that are trying to do things to help this place, 33 blocks of which were torn down in 1970 by a single pipeline company. So the challenge here is that What practitioners and their representatives tell us again and again across jurisdictions is that their city's daily practical prose fall short of the poetry of partnership that we know places need. They say we are a partner, but they don't treat us like one. Everything here flows from a municipal mindset that needs to change about partners. We need to acknowledge and affirm that these new forms of governance have gotten great things done for cities. They're really important. We need to trust them, just as we need to encourage them to be more transparent and accountable. And we need cities to be more transparent and accountable about how they work with them. So finally, okay, we argue at great length in our chapter that place matters more than ever, and there's an urgent need for collaborative effort among practitioners to figure all this out. The challenge is that there's a lot of siloed or isolated efforts that make it feel like a huge or impossible lift to bring all of this together. And it sounds just like not a lot of fun. So I wonder if we have a group here today that could actually represent the whole span of who we need in this conversation in order to figure out how to build multi-sector support, how to create more inclusive kinds of hyperlocal collaborations, and the policy changes that are going to be needed to support them. I salute the University of Buffalo, Conrad, and the Center for bringing us together to get started on fighting about this, and let's see what we can figure out. This is Central Park Today. We can figure this out.